Bolsharov go Farrelly Gluck, Farrelly Felsa. Hello everyone, you're very welcome to Virtual Farrelly Gluck 2020. My name is Eddie Farrelly and I want to tell you the story of a wall that I have just finished in the last couple of days. I built this wall to commemorate Farrelly Gluck 2020. Because we cannot be on the island, I decided that I can be building a wall in Cavan rather than on Inisheer. So I wanted to give you, I'm not going to go into the details about the construction methods or anything like that, but I want to point out a few interesting features that I've built into the wall. So we'll start here, and the wall is a retaining wall built in against an earth bank. Now when I started, this earth bank was coming out here and was up to the height of this shed here. Now I could have got in a mini digger to dig out the bank, but out of respect for the traditional way that the old boys done it 150 or 200 years ago, they had no machinery, they dug everything by hand. So I decided I'd use my crowbar, my mattock, my spade and shovel, and I dug out this bank the whole way along. And then of course I started by laying the foundation stones, which are big wide stones in the bottom. Behind that I packed it into the bank with filling stones. Now the wall is built mainly with field stone from around the area. The geology of this area is predominantly grey whack, but some of the stone is very shaly and really difficult stone to work with. If you touch it with the hammer, instead of having one stone, you end up having 10 or 20 stones that smashes into smithereens. So you really have to build the stone the way that you find it. So the bulk of the stone on the wall is local stone, gathered from around the site here. Some more was contributed by a neighbour down the road, Aidan Gillick, who had an old demolished building, and I reused this. I salvaged the stone from his old building, and it is interspersed throughout the stonework of the whole wall. I also got some field stone donated by another neighbour, T.P. Riley. The capping stones on the top of the wall have come from Mike Kelly's quarry near Knockcrockery in County Roscommon. As I said, there are a few interesting features that I would like to point out to you about this wall. And the first feature I would like to draw your attention to is this particular stone here. It has almost a perfect dome shape carved into it. And it seems to have been carved. It doesn't seem that it's a natural phenomenon. It seems that somebody actually done this. But the interesting thing about it is that there is an arrow on it here, which is something I have never seen before. What it was used for, I'm not exactly sure. But my brother briefly told me today that he was speaking to a neighbour, and the neighbour was trying to explain to him that it has something to do with sea level. So if any of you people who are watching this video know what this arrow and this dome-shaped carving could represent, I'd be really interested in learning what it's all about. There is also another mark here, a chiseled mark, which I am not quite sure what it represents either. So that's the first feature. Now along with that, as I said to you, it's mainly predominantly local stone and stone donated by neighbours, plus the quarry stone from Roscommon. But in certain areas I have other pieces of stone that I took with me from places where I had built walls before or where I had taken part in workshops. I was in the habit of always bringing one or two stones as mementos of the places that I was in. So I put them into the wall too. For example, this one here I think came from County Mayo. This one came from County Galway. there's different stones. There's stones from Cork, there's stones from Donegal, there's stones from Westmeath, and all over the place. Now the next feature stone that I'd like to point out to you is this stone here. This is a spud stone into which the back post of a wrought iron gate would have been placed, with a hoop then up at the top of the gate into the pillar or into the pier to hold the gate in position. And you can see that if you look closely at the stone, you can see where the spud actually wore the stone away over time. This is a big lump of a rock that I dug out of the bank when I was in there. And actually in this location here, there was a rock about that height, probably about 1.5 to 2 meters long, which was right in the line of the wall. And I had to dig that out and try to split it up using chisels and bolsters. But I was, as I referred to earlier, the stone around here is pretty shaly, so it broke up quite easily for me, so it didn't represent too big of a problem. Now there was one day I was here coming up to lunchtime, and I was running out of stone on this particular day, and I said, what will I do to finish the wall, or to finish my day's work today? So I remembered I had these round cobbles which came from Barna in County Galway. And there's a good bit of length in them. Most of them are at least 8 to 10 inches in length. So I knew that I could use them on the wall. I didn't plan this, it just worked out organically that it happened to end up a kind of a circular design. But when I was away that evening, I came back a couple of days later, I noticed that somebody had moved 1 or 2 of the stones, and I could not get them back into exactly the same position as I had them before. Thus, I was left with a slight gap here, although the stones are touching inside. But I was a bit disappointed to see this gap. However, I left it as it was. It's part of the story of the wall. Somebody touched those stones when I wasn't here, and I'm prepared to leave it that way. The next feature I want to show you is I am trying to do a very amateur biodiversity study on the wall. So in this particular area here, I have built in this stone so that it can be removed with ease. So I'll remove it just to show you. That's the stone there. It's about 6.5, 7 inches long. This cloth here and this cham jar here, I put the cham jar in with some beer in it to see what biodiversity, what species or what insects or whatever it will attract. At the moment, I see a spider, I see 2 or 3 slugs, I see 3 slugs at least, I see some type of a fly. I don't know what type of a fly it is. It's a reddy brown colour which I've never seen before, so I don't recognise what species it is. But that was only put in yesterday evening. This cloth I had in for a few this cloth, I emptied this jar out onto the cloth. It was in the wall for a couple of days, the jar, and I emptied it out to see what was in it. And unfortunately, they're more meat now than anything else, but I can assure you that there were bees in it, there were houseflies, there were slugs, there were ants, and there were flying ants, just to name a few. Others, I don't know what they were. So I'm going to put this back in, and hopefully tomorrow or the next day when I check it again, there will be a lot more insects or whatever inside in it. I think that a stone like this, you have often heard of the saying, the hole in the wall and the hole in the wall pub and so on. I think that historically, the hole in the wall represented a safe place for keeping valuables. The house owners had a stone in the wall like this where they could easily run out and hide their jewellery or their coins or gold sovereigns if they were lucky enough to have them. So I think that's where the hole in the wall saying came from. It was from a hole that was left in the wall, but a stone placed in that could be easily removed. Now, In speaking about biodiversity, from my start of building the wall, it became almost immediately apparent to me the wide range of species that were attracted to the wall. Within a half an hour of me laying 2 or 3 stones, the ants began to colonise the walls. And within a day or two, there were millions of them in the wall. But there were also a range of bee species attracted to the wall. And in fact, this earth bank here was much higher after I dug out the foundation and so on. And the bees were burrowing into that high bank as well from day one. We will now move on to the next part of this story of this wall. This is my home place here, and in my childhood, in my growing up years, my parents were very generous to both stranger and familiar face as visitors. The house was widely known in the area as a Cayley house, or it would be called a rambling house in other areas of the country. The door was always open and people were always welcome to walk in, sit down and have a cup of tea or whatever my mother could prepare for them. And in honour of their memory and their generosity, I decided that I would add a seat into the wall. This is a welcoming seat. I would like to call it a friendship seat. The reason I would like this seat to be known as a friendship seat is because there is a seat here for me and there is a seat for a visitor. And whether that visitor is familiar face to me or a stranger, if they sit on this seat alongside me, they will be a friend. Now the seats and the backrests were supplied again by Mike Kelly in Roscommon. The armrests, the 3 armrests, and they're quite substantial armrests, were donated by my nephew down the road from an old demolished field wall, and they worked out perfectly as armrests for this seat. This stone that I'm standing on was originally a lintel, and it was donated to me by my neighbour Aidan Gillick from his old demolished building. I rescued it from a demolition heap so that it would not become smashed up or when it would be moved maybe at some future date. So I utilised it as a thread here walking in towards the seat. Now just to finish off the wall, I decided that I would make the end a stepped end on which I could place planters or flower pots just to brighten up the wall and add a little bit more of interest or attraction to it. So that brings us to the end of the story of the wall. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you want to make any comments, I would love to hear them. So that's it. Slán a gaibh. Thank you very much.